So when he asked me to do this first talk about innovations, I was trying to think of what's the newest and latest, greatest thing. So he kind of mentioned it, and I'll talk about it a little more in the end of my presentation. But it's like we have a lot of technology that we can use that wasn't available 10, 20 years ago. So I found that graphic as like innovation. I searched like, well, do we have like laser fences, some kind of laser, and so conceptually it's in video games, it's in sci-fi movies, but we don't have anything quite that advanced as of yet. But what I'm going to talk about is some of our current, what do we have for mapping, what do we have for monitoring, and what do we have for tracking. And then looking at the future of what he mentioned, kind of having this virtual fence where he created this online and using that to pretty much control the animals within the real world. So that's kind of part of what I'm going over. So a lot of what we have for online mapping tools or measuring tools, we have Google Earth is one. These are all freely available. Kentucky-based map is another good tool. And Ag Site Assessment Tool, that's University of Missouri Extension. So one of these three sites are good starting points or good tools that you can utilize. As far as Google Earth, what we can do with that is pretty much we can click on it. It's kind of hard to see, but one of the things it says here is we can see what's here. And so you click on that, so you right-click. It brings up this drop-down menu, and there's a selection option that says what's here. This will actually give you the latitude and longitude, so in decimal degrees and degrees, minutes, seconds. So this can be good for if we're working with a lot of extension agents or producers. A lot of times they'll tell me, well, the farm doesn't have an address, but you go past this old barn, go around the curve, the sharp curve, and it'd be right there on your right. So a lot of times this can be helpful for us, doing assessments before we get there of, this is where my barn is, this is where I need to go to. So for us, it can be very helpful because it can just send us that latitude, longitude, and we're good to go as far as punching that back into Google Maps and saying, this is where we need to go. As far as measuring, so there's another option, it's a little harder to see. It actually says measure distance. So we can click on that. So this is within Google Maps. And you just click along there, and it'll give you a summation of what that distance is. And you can go all the way around your perimeter here. And at some point, if you go back onto itself, it'll actually give you area as well. So it'll give you, in, I think, square meters and square feet. It'll give you that area, and you just have to punch that into Google and get you to convert. So this tells you that's about 10 acres there, or they're about 10 acres. So that's one thing. So this is just something we can do that's quick and easy. If you're trying to figure out how much perimeter fence do I have to do, this is one way that's quick and easy, but it does have some limitations. So as soon as you click off of it, you lose that area calculation. So it loses the area as soon as you click off. You go one step further. So that's just one of the limitations. So there you can see a little better, where you can see, we can see what's here, which gives you your latitude, longitude, and then you can actually have measure distance. At this point it says clear measurements because we've already started measuring, but it would say measure distance there as well. So Google Maps, it's got some pros. It's quick, easy. You can get location, you can get area. Limitations are you can't really save it, although and you lose area. You can't really do more than one field at a time. So that's kind of been one of our. But for a lot of producers, it's quick and easy. Another option is Kentucky-based maps. Pretty much you can enter your address or zip code, get zoomed down to your farm, and then pretty much you do a similar thing. You can measure just the distance. You can measure area. So using polygon features, you can measure area, and then you can specify whatever units you want. If you want to measure your perimeter, you can say I want feet, I want miles, or even your area. You can say acres, square feet, meters, whatever it may be. So in this case, you choose your colors and you highlight it. It provides you the details on how many acres it is, how much of your perimeter is, and you can do multiple fields at once. So this one gives you a little more options. You can get different color patterns. You can print this out. You can put it in a file, save it. Well, not save it, but you can just print it out and you have it in that format. However, pros, you can create different shapes and colors. You can measure different fields. It does give you area and distance for your fields. However, your cons are you can't really save it, and you can't export shape files or KML files. So it's not something you can give to your extension agent. Say, here, just use this. I've already created this field boundary. Another tool that I think is good for if you're looking at property to buy or looking at other property which you're going to lease could be this ag site assessment tool. It gives you much more data. So it gives you your area centroid hydraulic summary. So if you need to know your streams, water bodies, wetlands, your 12-digit HUC code, which would be important for some engineering aspects, your soils, productivity, your environmental, and your climatic data as well. So temperature, precipitation, windrows, 30, and it gives you, so the windrows should be 30 years, but this gives you about a 7-year windrows. So this would be the type of data you'd see. So, how close are your population centers, your total amount of stream within the area identified, wetland bodies, some other, your soil characteristics. So if you need to know the soil characteristics of a farm you're purchasing, this would be, could be important. It doesn't. Annual precipitation. So, last year, it says annually 46.9. This is for Lexington. So last year we actually, the maximum was 69. We got 71.9, I think, in Lexington. So, last year we had a whole lot of rain. This year we seem to be doing a little better. It's not inundating us at this point. So it gives you some more data. So temperature, data, windrows, and nearest airports and other aspects. So, what else can we do with this? We can, like I said, like before, get our area. We can get, the centroid point. We can actually, this is another neat tool. You can actually create a line across it. Gives you your slope, change in slope. So that's kind of a neat tool as well. So you measure paths. So it gives you not only the measurement dimensions, but also tells you, the change in elevation, or shows you the change in elevation and your slope. So it's not 100% accurate, but it does give you a general idea of how the land would lay. So this is kind of a neat tool. So this was probably done on a 10-meter digital elevation model. So it's going to be a little rough, but general picture is there. So you can, again, get the area. If you need to get the area, it gives you all the different dimensions, square feet, meters, and acres. So again, it's free, has lots of information. It's really good if you're looking to purchase property. It gives you that just general overview of what you would be looking at. But again, you can't save or export files is another limitation. But these are all online tools that are quick and easy to use. So, what we can use that's also free is Google Earth Pro. And so it's free to download on your desktop. I think they have a phone version, but the desktop version is the one you want, because there's an online version as well. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. This is free to download. And it seems to have more, the desktop version is just more practical for farmers, in my mind. There's two main file types we can save as. KML is a simple file type. You have no embedded images. Always save as KMZ, so if we need to put more information in there, it's there. We can add it. And it's just a little more versatile, so I don't even worry about KML, but it is an option. So, what can we get with this? So we can see here, here's a farm that's been laid out within Google Earth. So we can see how we've laid out our waters, 4 different locations in the field, how we can have access to those different fields. So this would be important if we're trying to communicate with our extension agents, other producers, or specialists about, this is my situation. I'm trying to do rotational grazing. I got my pasture size is this. I'm going every certain number of days. Do I need to, this provide them with a lot more, I think, information as how to help set up or how to reorient. If they, if you're trying to plan this out, it can help. This is what I've drawn up. What do you think? And so it'd be a good way to get some feedback. You can take it to your neighbors, and plus, so we have different types of data: points, lines, and polygons. So points would be good for your identifying where your waters are. Lines would be good for if you run a water line, just to know where they are. And I tell producers, and polygons, so be making for what you make for your field to give you that area. And I tell producers, it's good to have maybe create this. Because, a lot of times, like the old timers, that institutional knowledge has to be transferred to the next generation. So a lot of them like, well, I knew that water line when they put it, I was here when they put it in, or I was here when they put this in. So to transfer that knowledge to the next generation might be good to put it on the map. So it's like, oh yeah, you'd think it would run straight from this hydrant to that hydrant, but we had to go around something. Or, it's good to go ahead and document that or try to draw that onto your map. Or, we go out there with the GPS puck and record along the water line. Like this is where it is, record those points along the line, then we can actually import that into Google Earth. So that can be one way in which we transfer some of that institutional knowledge to the next generation. And so data management. So we can actually save these. So we can save these, export them to, we can organize our files. So I put all my one farm, if you have all those different fields for one farm, this is the Brown Road farm, this is the Alfred Road farm, this is Clint's farm section. You can put all those to a single file folder. So or have it done by year. But we can organize them to similar farms, similar pastures, and all we have to do on that is just right-click on whatever folder we have those in, right-click, and then pretty much say export. To export, right-click and click email. This is supposed to say email, so it's a little lower resolution, but we can email that information to producers, to other extension specialists or producers, and we can save this. So this has a lot of, we don't have to keep recreating the wheel every time. It's like, well, how big was that field? How many acres was it? What was the perimeter on that field? All that information would be saved on here. So this in my mind, Google Earth is a very valuable tool. Like I said, we can add information. So if you want to click on any one of the fields, you can say, well, I've added, my ID, tract, acres, crop name, amount of potassium, lime, soil, phosphorus, whatever information I want to have, it's all right there. You can add that to the description of your field. So I can do this for every year. I take a soil sample for like a certain field. I'll put that in there and have it separated by year. So 2018 it was this, 2019 is a separate file. For all my fields I sampled in, I'd have that information. It's just another way to have it, and you can add pictures too. So if I had a water here, so I, like one of my points on this farm was a waterer, include a picture of like the last time I had to work on it. Or what I have there, 4-ball Richie. And it's obviously frozen up when I'm doing work in non-ideal times. So, monitoring. So there's all types of tools for monitoring. And so, you need to have something where you can actually, he talked about it a little bit, and so you need to have some way to monitor it. Whether fence tester, cattle are aggressive poker players. Yeah, they're aggressive poker players, and farmers themselves are poker players. Every year we plant a crop, and like, all right, this year it's going to rain, or this year it may not rain as much. And so we're trying to bet, the cattle will try to call your bluff every time. It behooves them to get out and get more grass, even though it's the same grass on this side. So have some way to test it. Growing up, we had a little blade of grass, and you could probably get your younger brother something to test at least once for you. Be like, oh yeah, get close to it. You can feel the electricity. You can? Yeah. You have to just be up this far, and then you kind of shove them into it. It works maybe once, maybe twice, and then they get wise to you. So, we always just have to make sure it's hot. Find some way, whether it's a fence tester, or they have the, done wirelessly now through Bluetooth, whatever way it's done, you need to make sure that you know that it's going to be hot, it's getting those animals, and keeping them in. And so, just be able to monitor your animals. Another way, we're exploring the use of using UAVs to monitor animals. We have, using these for actually monitoring, the cows are in the pasture, volume. There's different ways which you can measure and there are regulations associated with the use of drones on the farm. So I'm going to just briefly say that, there is for using it for commercial purposes, we have to have a license to fly. And all drones have to be registered with the Federal Aviation Administration if they're over 0.2 pounds. So pretty much most all drones have to be registered with the Federal Aviation Administration. But it's $5 to register them, and it's, I think, $150 to take this knowledge test for commercial purposes. If you're operating them for recreational purposes, so if it's fun and you happen to be, your cows happen to be in the photo, or looking along the fence line. For recreational purposes, you don't need a license. But if you're operating for commercial purposes or getting paid, you need to have a license to fly. And so there's apps that tell you whether your airspace is clear. For here, it should be generally clear. There's no major airports. In Lexington, we have to worry about Bluegrass Airport. And there's a lot of smaller airfields around the state. I forget how many, by the time you include all the hospitals that have helipads and different people with, I think there's like 400 some odd, quote unquote, airfields, but not all of them are going to have airspace requirements or restrictions. It's usually towered airports will have a restriction of 5 nautical miles around the airport. So you can fly those. We can check fence lines. So this we're flying about 25 feet above ground level, just flying along, looking at the fence line, looking for problems. We can see it. We can do a quick, easy assessment. And so that's been one thing. I can fly from here a quarter mile. It's just as the crow flies, it'll go up to about 44 miles an hour. If you fly, higher you fly, the more you can see. So you can fly up to 400 foot ceiling above ground level. If you fly lower, you can get a much higher resolution. See, okay, we got some trees down on or near our fence. So that's just been, it's not something you have to have. You can still get boots on the ground, but it can be a quick way to get a general assessment of what's going on your farm. You can set up dedicated for Apple users. I think you can use ground station control to get you a dedicated flight path around the edge of your farm. For Android users, would be using Drone Harmony potentially to set up your flight paths and camera orientations. So yeah, there's another picture of just us flying around saying, oh yeah, there's a tree. It's not on the fence, but it's definitely near the fence, and more we're soon to follow after that one. One good thing about those is this is kind of a newer technology. You can avoid these when you're checking the cows or fence. You don't have to go, as long as you maintain visual line of sight, as the current rules and restrictions are now, or law is, to maintain current line of sight, visual line of sight. But it helps you avoid kind of this problem. You get out there and you're getting stuck in the mud. So you can go out there, check your hay range, you can fly over the problems, and then head back out there and solve it. So what solved this was just a geotextile pad. And so you can actually cover a fair amount of ground. So this one you can see almost 70 acres, and it probably took to go from here to where the drone is was probably about less than a minute. So you can actually cover a fair amount of ground. I actually got out there, like the Kawasaki Mule left here, and I got out there before the Kawasaki Mule did. So you can cover a fair amount of ground. Yeah. So this one is just a Phantom 4, and I personally like that one just because there's a lot of cheap drones out there, but with the cheaper drones, you become a much better pilot, as opposed to with the Phantom 4, it does a lot of thinking for you. So it has 3 important modes in my mind: hover, the ability to hover. So I can take the controls, I let go of the controls, it just hovers. If I'm flying towards something, I let go of the controls, it stops and just hovers. So that's an important feature, that's a very important feature that you don't realize how important it is until you don't have it, because otherwise you just end up crashing. And but we have to make sure it's for a practical purpose. So if we're out there, I can check cows, I can go out there, fly above them, get a quick count, or say, oh, I see 10, fly back. No, that feels good. Fly to another farm. And you can potentially fly with these up to a mile away. And if they say you maintain visual line of sight, that thing becomes a speck in the sky at that point. Even at 400 feet, if I flew straight up 400 feet, it's still a speck in the sky. But they are fairly nimble, and it gives you a lot of versatility. It takes you a lot less time to check animals. Just get you the quick count. If one's missing, you still got to go out there and put boots on the ground, or you maybe find her if she's off by herself. They can't see through trees, but you can get ones with infrared, but they cost a lot more. They're a lot more spendy. But and also, okay, so the other thing about the Phantom 4, the other feature is, so one was hover, second feature was return to home. That's an important feature. So if you do lose sight of it, if you do lose signal, it takes off. It says home point has been updated. So it's recording the GPS. When it takes off, it records that GPS point as the home point. And so with these drones, it'll have about 5 or 6 foot variation within the GPS signal quality. So if it takes off here, most of the time it's going to land right back here. But occasionally it'll land over here or over there by the wall. So make sure you have plenty of room when you take off, just in case, because sometimes your GPS, the number of satellites you can see varies. But it should be generally about 5 to 12. But the return to home, when you lose sight of it, or you can just hit the return to home button. Like, I know it's out there, I hear it, but I can't see it or know which way I'm going. I can look at my screen, hit that return to home button, or if it even loses signal, it'll return to home. So that's an important feature. Well, you can, but they're like the thermal adds, and depends on what you're really looking for there. It'll add at least $1 to $2 grand. So thermal, I just said that's an option, but it's more of kind of a academic option. And plus, they haven't figured out, how can we really distinguish now between a cow? Well, make sure we can distinguish between a cow and some other animals as well. And then the third feature. So let's see. The third feature is it does have collision avoidance. It has, I think, either depending on which version you get, some of them have the monocular vision sensors, so they're able to detect objects around them. Some of them have like a smaller LiDAR system, and some of them have I forget, the ultrasonic sensors. So usually pretty lightweight. So there are different options of how it detects objects around it, so it doesn't hit the wall, it doesn't hit the tree. Power lines are still an issue. Power lines are still an issue. That's how I've crashed mine. So power lines, it can't see that power, it can't distinguish that power line as easily thanks to the artifact, and then you crash. So power lines usually what get me, and I was focusing on the cows as opposed to what was around me, my surroundings. So situational awareness is always important. But it can be a tool, and I just like that one because you don't have to worry about being a good pilot. You're pretty much just focused on whatever you're looking at.
Josh, about 5 more minutes.
Okay, I think I'm. It also, so it should come back home. I mean, you'd have to tell it to not come back home. You have to say, I know what I'm doing, essentially, keep flying. And so that puts the risk on you, and it should also tell you when you're in a Class B or C airspace. So I think we're generally okay down here. Class G would be good airspace, and generally it's G airspace. And you might have to worry about a 700-foot floor, but you never should be above 400 foot on some Class E airspaces. Yeah. So depending on which version you get, it'd be anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800. And that's for the drone itself, the controller, and then I think maybe 2 batteries. And so each battery will last you about 24 minutes of actual flight. I think they'll last up to 30 minutes depending on your wind, but you want to have some of that buffer time to make sure you get out there and land before you crash, get back home. And I always say, and Clint and I have also talked about, well, legally, okay, what if I fly over my neighbor's property? Well, technically, originally when we had the drones, they were actually registered aircraft, and then what about when they got shot down? It's like, well, then they've changed it where they are registered, quote unquote, airplanes, but technically the FAA controls everything technically above the ground. However, if the person's out there with a shotgun, I'm not going to argue with them. So I'd always just fly over my property to make sure I'm not going to lose that $1,200 investment. But if you crash, and that's where Clint and I were talking at some point, if you crash, though, on your neighbor's property, then it's how good of a neighbor they are. Because now you're trespassing and other things, so then it becomes a different issue. So to avoid any issues, I would just fly over my property or have permission to fly. It's always just be, like Clint said, be a good neighbor. Not necessarily. Like sometimes if you crash, like we crashed the other day from 70 feet, and it was we just lost propeller. From 70 feet. Yeah, we were doing some surveys above, we were looking at some alfalfa pastures, and we crashed at 70 feet, replaced the propeller, and we're right back up. So it depends on how bad you crashed. We were only going maybe 5 miles an hour conducting a grid pattern search. So it depends on, if you crash into a wall, it's, and they go up to 44 miles an hour, it's gone, You say that legally, if you're a commercial cattle operator, you're supposed to have your license. So if you're using it for commercial purposes, you would need to have a license. If it's recreational, if it's just, you're out there having fun, and the cattle happen to be there. I mean, but if you're getting compensated in some other way, if you go to somebody's wedding and start filming and flying, then you definitely would need a license.
But for our purposes, on a
small farm, you probably. Yeah, I mean, I told somebody the other day, I was like, what else are you going to do with them but look at something? And the cows are moving, so that makes it more interesting to look at. So that was my rationale. So I meant to show if you're flying at 400 feet, the cows are going to look like ants. So when we get down to, you can get better optical. They don't have optical zoom, but you get digital zoom and get better cameras. But that would be how it generally looks from a Phantom 4 default 12 megapixel camera. That's 400 feet above ground level. So you can see about 5 acres or so. And it depends on your it depends on your camera orientation. You change the pitch of your camera, you can obviously see a little more. So drone harmony, you can get the waypoints. So this is one if you're using Android. They have a similar thing for DJI waypoints for Apple users. So you can get the waypoints, camera angles. You can set up and you can control. Like I want to look at this angle, at this direction, at 150 feet above ground level. And so you can update your altitude, pitch, how smooth your flight plan is. You can reverse your flight plan. So it's just gives you a couple different options. And then also shows you how your flight path would look and the angle at which your camera's going. So it shows you the angle, potentially your view field. So that's with drone harmony. So that's just one of the options. There's there's like 3 or 4 other options you can use, but it also gives you a summary for your flight plan information. So the future, real quick, and I'll be done. They were talking about was having this virtual fencing. So where they had that E-Shepherd collar on the animals, where the satellites communicate with that collar, given the GPS signal. So we have 24 of those flying. Well, 24 for the United States, 24 for Russia, and I think 10, maybe 16 for China by this point. So we have this virtual fencing. He inputs his map, it communicates with the base station, and he inputs it from his smartphone. So that information gets communicated. So whenever the cow approaches this virtual fence, it beeps. And so they know that from prior experience and training, it's kind of like a dog fence. They get shocked whenever they go too far into this prohibited area. So it's a deterrent for them. So as long as you got decent forage for them, this is one way. And so making this cost effective, would be the key for production purposes. So like you said, out west, I can see where it makes more sense if you have a large area. They have a solar charger on it here on the top of the collar here, so it's actually solar powered. And so, so you don't have to worry about the battery power being an issue. And so I can see where that make a lot more sense out west. Here, we got everybody and their brother, right next to each other. So so I think we probably have to stick with what Clint said and have a legal fence. Out west, probably not as much of a problem, but you want to keep them out of certain zones.
This may not be a legal fence yet.
This may not be. Having no fence at all may not be a legal fence for a boundary. So.
As far as boundaries and things, how close would it get?
So you're.
If you wanted to divide 6-acre patches.
So right now, you want to have like with most of your GPS, unless you get into RTK, you have about like a 15-foot buffer. So you have about 15-foot buffer between them. So you'd have a little bit of variation there.
And like one of those base stations
So
cover how much of an area?
that's the thing. They haven't quite got these out, and he said they're out and ready to go. Depending on the lay of the land. If you had East Kentucky, probably not too far. Here, you could probably be line of sight, generally speaking.
One more question? I was just going to ask if you could return to that one slide that was early in your presentation that had all those references.
Okay, I think some of it might be in the book, I believe, but it might be a separate page, I think, in the book. This one. Let me see. So, anybody else have any other questions? I guess, I don't want to hold up the lunch crowd here.
All right, any more questions? Josh will be around for a little while. Right?
Yep, I'll be around for a little while.
Okay, so let's thank Josh for